Hey Jess, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's my absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I've been waiting a long time to have you on, and you're in an industry that's extremely interesting for me. And I know I say this every time on the podcast, but it really does kind of surprise me every time I get a new guest on from a completely new industry. And it's so amazing to see, young people doing some amazing things in some industries that I wouldn't even think we would be covering on this podcast. And obviously today it's all about lab grown diamonds and jewelry and all of that stuff, which is so cool for me to explore.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think even for us, like before starting, and when we launched, like most people never heard about it. I think it's a very traditional industry that hasn't seen much change and that hasn't really spoken to our generation. So
Yeah.
we're here to try and make it more approachable and more interesting to us
Mm.
as customers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is, with a lot of the sort of industries that we cover on this podcast, it is heavily, technology, software, that sort of thing. And, these are industries that have only really existed for the past sort of 20, 30 years at the most. Whereas the mining industry is probably one of the oldest industries, in the world, right? So, and as a whole, it hasn't really been changed. It's kind of remained the same for centuries. And I mean, you're probably the best person to talk to because that's kind of where your family came from, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I launched Kimai with my childhood best friend Sydney, and we actually both grew up in Belgium to diamond trading families. So we've always been around diamonds and jewelry our entire life. And we felt that with the years, we moved to London when we turned 18 to study over here. And it's at that point that we personally became more and more conscious of our impact and more conscious of our purchasing decision. But we definitely see it as a generational switch. We were seeing and looking for newer brands doing things with more transparency in their supply chain, more traceability in it. And looking at the diamond industry and fine jewelry industry was really, really hard to find any simple answer to our question about the origin of the stone to really understand how many people were involved before a diamond gets to its final owner.
Mm.
And of course, with all the controversies in the industry, from blood diamond to child labor, we just felt that our generation was evolving, but the industry never really evolved with us and never really tried to do things in a different way in order to have a smaller impact on our people and the planet.
That's really interesting. So I guess the motivation behind starting Kimai was all around sort of the negative aspects of that mining industry. Obviously, diamonds, that's huge. So yeah, is that where the motivation came from?
Yeah, definitely. So we've, as I said, like grew up around diamonds and jewelry, and we really value it a lot because, jewelry is something that is timeless. You can carry it on from one generation to another. It carries a lot of memories, a lot of, yeah, basically a very sentimental value to it, rather than what people see. Like the value that we see in fine jewelry is really like the memory that you can have a piece of jewelry that was your grandma. You can buy a piece of jewelry for yourself
Mm.
to celebrate a special moment. Is it a new job? Is it graduation? So it's really like represent different moments in time. So we really, really valued that industry, but just felt that like the way things were done wasn't right anymore, at least, and really trying to figure out how can we give the same emotional value but have a smaller impact, and how can we make that industry much more approachable in the way they talk to their customers as well. Because if you look at the diamond and fine jewelry industry, it often was targeted to men and always about the men having to purchase it for a woman, while today women are much more independent purchasing for themselves. And for us it was really important to find a brand that wasn't intimidating as a
Mm.
woman to purchase their own pieces.
That's so interesting, and like I think we'll talk about that a bit later. But as for starting the business, obviously that problem exists where you analyzed it, firsthand, or obviously from the experience. But I mean that's the problem, right? And then how did you kind of come up with that solution of the lab grown diamonds? Because obviously there's different ways you could have maybe approached this. There's a startup out there called, oh, I can't remember their names, but they use artificial intelligence to basically track the different supply
Mm.
chains, and basically, from there, it's a lot more transparent when it comes to purchasing decisions, right? So, oh, sorry, blockchain, not artificial intelligence. So, for you as a business, how did you kind of want to tackle that problem of trying to find ethical diamonds, ethical jewelry, and that sort of thing?
I think we're lucky enough that we grew up in that industry, meaning that like we could ask the questions we had to people that are at the forefront of it and really understand the industry inside out. I do think that there are different ways of going about it in terms of, as you said, blockchain, etc. But often there's
Mm,
many loopholes. So we just felt that not only from a sustainability perspective, but even from a modern and innovation perspective, the lab grown diamond aspect really spoke to us because, firstly, we're able to get the exact same stones
mm,
at a much smaller impact on our planet. And again, as I said, on the people living and working in those mines. But secondly, like it's a new innovation, a new way of doing things. Today, we eat lab grown meat.
yeah.
We wear yeah, there's all kind of like innovation enabling us to do things in the exact same way but in a more transparent and sustainable way, and we just felt that the lab grown diamond aspect really spoke to us on those two aspects, so like transparency but also innovation.
Mm.
And the first time we heard about those diamonds was really, as I said, like talking to the right people in the industry and asking the right questions, and that's how it, yeah, how it came to life.
So you got the idea of trying to go down the lab grown diamond routes. What was the sort of like next step? Did you, I don't know, approach a lab? I don't know how the process works. So like how did you kind of go about that?
So the goal of the brand was really okay. We've decided to use lab grown diamonds, but it was really for us important to really know who we were working with, not just using those lab grown diamond as a marketing tool. So like doing our research on the lab grown side of it took a lot of time. So like talking to different labs, understanding what kind of energy they're using, understanding where they're manufacturing their diamonds, what's the water usage, the carbon emission, etc. And again, I think being in that industry enabled us to kind of have access to those people quite easily. But then was really about like visiting the places and really having close relationship with them. Because the main point for us is not just about using that marketing tool, but really making sure it's backed.
Mm,
And then in terms of jewelry, our goal was really not to trade off on quality or design and really keeping that European savoir-faire that we have in Antwerp for the manufacturing side of it, which enables us as well to, again, have control over the supply chain, like working with the lab closely. We know where those diamonds are made, we know who made them. Manufacturing in Antwerp enables us to know each person
mm,
in our supply chain and really being able to visit them daily, making sure that the working environments are fair. And then from a design perspective, our goal wasn't to launch with a collection of thousands of designs, but really rather a small collection with more thoughtful designs to start with that are kind of your jewelry essentials. And then we launch new products, new designs every month. So I think those were the most important aspect before launching the brand. But we launched super bootstrapped, meaning like we didn't fundraise. We put less than $5,000 each into the business to make one piece of each design. We're lucky enough that we didn't have to commit to any inventory. So we were able to like design pieces, produce them, and just like manufacture when we sell pieces
mm.
with like a quick turnaround. And so we didn't have a branding in place. For us it was really like we want to test the market, test the product market fit, because again back then most people didn't hear about lab grown diamonds. So the challenge wasn't just about like launching a nice brand, it's also about educating customers, but also about like changing an entire industry mindset, an industry that has been doing things and selling things in the exact same way for years.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
we for our goal was really to try and see how people reacted, because we were one of the first brands to really launch with those diamonds. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we wanted to get the data out of it, and yeah, and bootstrap to get the word out there without an amazing branding in place then, because
Yeah.
you couldn't afford it. So it was really a lot of bootstrap.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, that's just like with a lot of startups, obviously, like you have to bootstrap. Like I started Wing with very little money as well, the same thing. And obviously it's not the same scale as diamonds because like they're obviously way more
Yeah.
expensive than like chips, a bit of software and whatever. But what's really interesting about what you just said, and I think it does go along with a lot of sort of very new innovations with industries that have been around for a long time, is that you said something very special there, where it was like you have to sort of convince the customer in a way, educate them, and so and this kind of process comes about in a lot of different areas. So obviously you mentioned lab grown meats, and another thing is like lab grown leather as well, is another big
Yeah.
one at the moment. So it's like when there's industries that and products that have existed for literally centuries, and it's become, I guess, part of our culture in certain ways. How do you go about, with a new innovation? Obviously, it's very close to the actual thing, but how does that process happen? How do you educate the customer with these new innovations that are way more sustainable than what's already existing?
Yeah. I think the main thing is like not trying to convince them, but
Mm,
rather educating them.
yeah,
Because it's really about giving them the information that we have available, that we've researched, that we know of, and then it's up to them to make their choice. For sure, like we're not here to force people to buy into lab grown diamond, but I felt that what we've seen is as soon as people get the information, they're able to make a better decision in terms of purchase. And I think the main issue in that industry, and I guess in many industries, is that most people, there's a lot of misinformation and lack of information, which means that most people just didn't have access to that side of the market. They buy into something without asking too many questions. So having access to that, yeah, to that information is key, but also what we're seeing is like customers are evolving and are becoming more and more conscious and are looking for those alternatives. So I often say like we're the generation that grew up not being conscious, I would say, and like educating ourselves step by step, while the younger
yeah.
generations grew up like super conscious of their impact, and it's really, really key to them. So it's having a mix of both. There are those super conscious customers that are really looking for it, and there's that more like upcoming customers that are asking the right questions. And I think the main thing for us, it's not about we don't I think the word sustainable is a very hard word to use just because like it's been used in marketing a lot lately and you
Yeah.
never know what it really means. And we as a brand, we don't claim that we are 100% sustainable brand. And I think it's really tough to be 100% sustainable brand because you're still creating a product, and it's and we can dig into it, but like with many aspects, like it's just hard to have like sustainable packaging to make sure like everything's like renewable energy,
Mm,
etc. So it's what we try to tell our customers, that it's all about like taking a step towards being more sustainable rather than being all in or all out. And that's also how we are as people and customer, my co-founder, myself, our team. We're really about being conscious rather than being completely at the extreme.
that's a really good answer. What I would love to move on to now is, I guess, so as you started your business, and it was bootstrapped, and I guess every time you get a new order, you can just go straight to manufacturing. At what stage would you say it got to the point where you really validated it in your mind that this is something that can grow, that can scale?
So as I said, we started with very little funding, and in order to get the word out there, we couldn't afford marketing. Meaning, like we couldn't, if we were like even back then doing a gifting one influencer was a big cost for us because
Yeah,
like we have
exactly.
a certain price point, which means that like gifting people costs a lot. And the main thing that really brought some change to the business is that we started with friends and family, and we were looking for like women to wear our pieces that represent the piece as well, and the value of the brand and the mission. And then we saw Meghan Markle as the perfect fit for this. In terms of sustainability, she wears a lot of more ethical brands. She's all about modernizing a very traditional world, So we saw her as the perfect, as the dream fit for the brand, but we never
Yeah.
thought we could access her. And what we've done is basically looking into her close network, looking at people that are less mediatized than she is, and figuring out how can we get their emails, how can we reach out to them. So like a lot of cold emails, and actually it got through. So like I'm a big believer of cold emails. That's all we do. And that's basically with a few cold emails, we got Meghan Markle to wear our pieces 2 months after our launch,
Wow.
which really accelerated not only the brand's visibility and credibility, but also the industry visibility and credibility. Because again, very new industry, looking up online back then, very little information available. Most people never heard about those diamonds before. Having a royalty wearing lab grown diamond for the first time really picked up. So like there was a lot of press coverage on the topic, and it's also a very controversial kind of topic where like you have those big diamond players that are kind of against the lab grown diamond industry.
Yeah, of
So
course.
it was a very interesting time. But I think it's definitely at that point that we were still in our full-time job and
Yeah.
and just trying to make it work. And it's really at that time that things picked up like crazy, and that we really understood that there was a huge demand for it, and that it wasn't served yet.
That's amazing. That was only 2 months after you launched as well.
Yeah, yeah. And when we launched only with fine jewelry, so like we started with fine jewelry, but today we have our engagement ring category that we launched 6 months ago. And actually, I think that's a second point where we really realized something's happening, because we thought, okay, so when it worked, fine jewelry is what people are looking for. It's pieces between $200 to $800, but we never thought that engagement ring would happen that quickly in terms of lab grown diamond, because again it's all about education, it's all about the mindset as well. But actually the industry has moved much faster than expected, where like people are more and more conscious, and there's much more awareness around lab grown diamonds. And the fact
Mm.
that we've launched it really wanting to try it out, we got a few demand for it before, and it's becoming like a big portion of our business. So we think like if people are getting into lab grown diamonds lab grown diamonds engagement rings, there is definitely something happening on that market.
Mm. How did you even get to her though? I'm trying to imagine like which email, who needs to know who for you to get to that stage? I don't understand.
I don't know. We never thought it would happen. It was so funny because I was talking to a friend that day that I sent those email, and he told me like you're losing your time, like focus on your business. And I'm like, oh God, like it worked out. So it's just about like I send like tens of thousands of email, and then you don't get an answer each time. But when you do, sometimes it works out. So I guess it's luck and hustling and figuring out how to get in touch with those people. And finding emails is an easy one. You can find
Mm.
kind of emails everywhere online.
Yeah. What did that sort of mean for your business? Like, I guess that was a turning point for you, kind of the before and after point. So, in terms of like growth, sales, like investment, even, what did that kind of mean for you as a business?
So as I said, we started with friends and family. So our sales were little, just really to for people to support it. People love the designs, etc. And having Meghan Markle to wear it, I think we had like hundreds of articles in like less than 3 days, and sales completely picked it up. So we grew to like hundreds of thousands of dollars in like a few weeks without having spent anything on marketing.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was crazy what happened. Like we still can't believe it, and I think that really enabled us to prove our concept further. And as you said, like we fundraised afterwards. And I think the fact that we were able to bootstrap and prove that there is demand for the product without having spent anything on marketing was super powerful for investors. And that's how we were able to fundraise just like 4 months later, approximately.
Mm. So the business is only like a few months old, realistically, and you've already raised, what is it, like $1 million?
Yeah, so we raised $1.2 million, approximately like a bit less than a year after launch.
That's really impressive. Wow. And I guess like Meghan Markle was obviously so instrumental in that launch. Like I'm guessing you never actually met her, but if you did meet her, what would you say to her?
That's a good question. No, we're super, I think like, yeah, we're super thankful. Like I think she's been wearing a lot of small brands and supporting a lot of female founded brands, which has impacted our brand, but we're not the only ones. So we know other brands as well that have been well impacted by her wearing pieces. Um, so yeah, we're really, really grateful.
Mm. Another thing that I wanted to get onto, and obviously you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, was around sort of the industry being very male dominated and brands that have created sort of diamond brands that are targeted towards, men. And it must be kind of a very unique position that you're in, being a female-led diamond brand now. What's been kind of like the reception of that? Has there been any backlash off the back of that? What's it been like?
I think we like as a brand, we don't focus ourselves on like the diamond industry. Like when we compare ourselves or look at like competitor, we don't look at like the traditional players. We
Mm.
compare ourselves much more to like a startup trying to do things differently, trying to do things in a more conscious way. But definitely, like as I said before, like the diamond industry has been basically dominated by one or two players who put a lot of pressure on the lab grown diamond side of it because they're kind of firstly they've always controlled the entire industry, so they want to take a stake at it, but they're
Yeah.
also kind of like scared on what's happening because we talk to a lot of customers and we see that those brands aren't appealing to our customers anymore. So for them, there's some work to be done in terms of traceability and the way they talk to their customers. But at the same time, in the meantime, what we've had is I don't think it's from a female male perspective, but rather from they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
They have a
Yeah.
lot of money as an industry to like sponsor magazines, to pressure brands, to pay for influencers with some more
And
traditional
politics as well,
messages.
right? Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of politics involved in stuff like this when there's a lot of money on the
exactly.
table.
Exactly. So we have spoken to journalists in the past who told us we can't write about you just because we have like those big sponsors. And I think like
Wow.
for us it makes us laugh because like it's even more exciting. Like something's really there's something big happening and they're even scared of it. So yeah, and we're focusing on our own on what we're doing rather than like looking at what they're doing. And yeah, let's see how it evolves. But yeah, we're not in a kind of we're not competing with them. Like I'm not trying
Mm.
to yeah, to be against them. I think like they have a lot of work to do. They've created nice brands, but the industry needs to evolve.
Where do you kind of see the future of the industry then? Because obviously, like lab grown diamonds are booming at the moment, and like you're obviously a player in that market. Where do you kind of see yourselves placed in that growing and sort of evolving industry?
Yeah, I think if you look at the top, yeah, the top of the market with all those new Bond Street brands, like people will continue buying into them because you're buying into a brand. But when we look at like fine jewelry in general, like the pieces we spoke about that we're offering that are between $200 to $2,000, uh, we do think it's gonna switch almost completely to lab grown diamonds. For
Mm.
engagement ring, I think it's gonna take a longer time, but we see it as well evolving that way. I think where the traditional industry will have its place is really in the more the bigger stones and the colored stones. So how we position ourselves is really we're in between those New Bond Street jewelers and those more high street jewelers, offering the quality you'll find at those New Bond Street jewelers, but at a more approachable price and really being with our customer for a lifetime. So we started with fine jewelry. We've introduced engagement rings, which enables us to like yeah, continue the journey with our customer and kind of like offering that personalization where like we get
Mm.
on calls with customers, we do Zoom calls, we're here to guide them if they have any request on bespoke pieces, and really creating that very special bond and relationship with them where we know our customer personally and are able to guide them through their purchases.
Mhm. That's really interesting. And very quickly before we wrap up the podcast, it's been amazing having you on, Jess, by the way. I'd love to know,
Thank you.
like, very, very briefly about, I guess, the process of lab grown diamonds. I know we've spoken a lot about the business as a whole, but the actual like physics and the actual process, like, how does it work? Because I saw obviously solar is involved in some stage.
So basically, I think firstly it's important to note that like a diamond is made 100% out of carbon. So there's nothing else in a diamond than carbon. And actually, it grows under earth in a high pressure and high temperature environment. And we're actually able to reproduce that environment today in a lab, meaning it's high pressure, high temperature, and it starts with a carbon seed, and in a few weeks it grows into a diamond. And the number of weeks to grow it depends on like the size, etc. But those diamonds are chemically and physically identical, which means that they all have their own inclusion, they all have their own imperfections, like a mine diamond would have. And also like all the big labs that are certifying mine diamond are today certifying lab grown diamonds in the exact same way based on the exact same rule, really showing that today a lab grown diamond is basically the same result but different environment. And I think a great comparison of it is, for example, if you put water in an iceberg and water in a fridge, you'll get the same result, but you're just able to do it in a different environment.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to finish actually. So Jess, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was such a pleasure having you on to talk about all the things, lab grown diamonds. It's something that we've never spoken about even close on the podcast before. So thank you so much for coming on. How can people stay in touch with you and Kimai in the future?
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure and always happy to chat about lab grown diamonds. To stay in touch, our Instagram account is kimai.co and our website is kimai.com. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to message me as well directly through LinkedIn or through Instagram.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jess. And I'm sure we'll speak soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.